Can everybody up the back hear me okay? We just raise your hands. Make sure you can hear me. Thank you very much. Well, first of all, could I maybe put apologies in? We're running an hour late, but that was because members of the Planning Committee were out in sites today, and it was quite a lengthy discussion on one of them, and we do apologise for that. Can I extend a warm welcome on behalf of the Deputy Provost, members and officials to this special meeting of Falkirk Council in the municipal buildings in Falkirk. Could I ask at this stage if everybody could check their mobile phones to ensure they're switched off? Thank you very much. Before we go into the agenda item, could I just like to welcome our new Chief Executive, Mr Kenneth Lawrie. This is his first full council meeting, and I don't know whether you'd like to say anything at this particular stage, Mr Lawrie. Thank you.
Thank you, Provost. Just thank you for your welcome, and it's a great pleasure to be here, and I look forward to working with all of you, I hope very successfully over the coming years. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Sedderant, please.
Yes, thank you, Provost. Provost Buchanan.
Present.
Deputy Provost Ritchie.
Present.
Councillor Aitchison. Yeah. Councillor Alexander. Present. Councillor Balfour. Present. Councillor Binney. Present. Councillor Bissett. Present. Councillor Black. Present. Councillor Blackwood. Present. Councillor Bowes. Present. Councillor Coleman. Present. Councillor Colley. Councillor Coombs. Here. Councillor Flynn. Present. Councillor Garner. Present. Councillor Goldie. Councillor Grant. Present. Councillor Harris. Present. Councillor Hughes. Present. Councillor Kerr. Present. Councillor McHugh. Present. Councillor McCluckie. Yeah. Councillor Meiklejohn. Present. Councillor Monroe. Present. Councillor Murtagh. Here. Councillor Nicholl. Here. Councillor Nimmo. Apologies. Councillor Patrick. Present. Councillor Reid. Present. And Councillor Spears. Present.
Thank you. That takes us now to declarations of interest. And just for clarity, I'll read it out. Members should declare any financial and non-financial interest they have in any item of business at the meeting, identifying the relevant agenda item and the nature of the interest. Have we any declarations of interest at this time from anybody? Fine, okay, fine. Thank you. Only item on the agenda, very, very important for everybody in the community, not just the Falkirk Council. It's the Falkirk Local Development Plan 2. It's the proposed plan, and it was continued from meeting of the 27th of June 2018. It's pages 2 to 10 on members' agenda. And we're going to ask Mr Moody, first of all, if he could run through an overview of how we're going to place this today. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Provost. And it maybe is helpful for members of the Council and for members of the public observing just to summarise the procedure which we propose to adopt this afternoon. I think, first of all, Provost, it would be appropriate to hear from Mrs Geisler and or Mr Shaw in relation to the report. Thereafter, I anticipate we'll hear from the Economic Development Portfolio holder moving the recommendations within the report, but subject to any adjustments which the Council makes to the plan during the course of this afternoon's meeting. And proposed adjustments have been consolidated in the document which has been just distributed to you by my colleague Mr Perry, and I think he will also have some copies to pass to members of the public sitting at the back of the room as well. The proposals are grouped hopefully in a manner which gives them some logical structure. First of all, to consider the issue of housing supply target, and then to move to some site-specific proposals, particularly in relation to housing. Thereafter, a site-specific proposal not relating to housing, and thereafter two more general policy issues which are set out in the front sheet to the consolidated adjustments. The proposal, Provost, is to consider these each in turn, and when we reach a proposal, to ask the member who is proposing that particular adjustment to the plan to propose the adjustment. There will then be an opportunity for members to ask questions of officers as to the implication of that adjustment, and if there isn't then general agreement on the proposed adjustment, then there would be an opportunity for debate and then a division. So the division would simply be, again, for or against the proposed adjustment. And that then, once we have gone through the list on the front sheet of the proposed adjustments, should at the end of the afternoon give us our agreed plan.
I may ask at this stage where the leader of the council and the group leaders, you've just yourself and your colleagues have just received this document, whether you want to take any time to peruse or maybe discuss at this stage at the very beginning. How do you feel, Councillor Meikle-John, Councillor Golding, Councillor?
I'm happy. I think most of the information has been circulated, Provost. I'm happy that we continue. Obviously, if anything arises during the meeting, that may be something then that we require to take a short recess on.
Okay, we're going to hear from the Director, Mrs Geisler.
Excuse me, Provost.
Yep.
Sorry to interrupt, but will there be an opportunity to raise any questions about the LDP apart from those in the amendments? The LDP itself? Yes, it's just as to progress on LDP 1 and so on.
LDP 1, yeah.
Yeah, I think that would be appropriate once we hear from Mrs Geisler and or Mr Shaw, if he's adding to what Mrs Geisler has to say.
Okay, thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Provost. Yes, ever since the adoption of our first conjoined plan, our first conjoined structure and local plan in July 2015 to form LDP, as it was then known, it's now become, of course, LDP1, my colleagues have been working on this next iteration of the plan, and that's exactly as it should be. The changes that the government made to the planning process are intended to keep plans relevant and live, and accordingly the timescales for creation of new plans are quite restricted in those sort of terms. So now we find ourselves looking at the latest iteration, which is LDP2. As you would expect, LDP1 has been our foundation stone for moving on from this. It detailed a broad vision for our area, which is the basis for the plan which is before members today. It's intended for that vision to be for a 20-year period, with details associated with that for a 10-year period. You'll remember that the first significant milestone in relation to the preparation of LDP2 was the Major Issues Report, which members previously considered and approved, and thereafter there was a significant period of consultation flowing from that. The consultation responses, it was a very active consultation. We got lots of very good feedback from various parts of our communities, and as a consequence of that feedback, we now are in a situation where we're able to bring a draft plan to members today. So the plan before you is contained in Appendix 1 to the report, which has been circulated to members. The plan itself is divided into 6 sections, and these are described in paragraph 4.1 of the report. As you would expect, our vision reflects the agreed priorities which are within our community planning partnership document, our SOLD, and our various corporate strategies which flow from the SOLD itself. The vision reflects our aspirations for all our various communities to be successful, to be vibrant, and for that to continue in a sustainable fashion moving forward. The second part of the plan is the spatial strategy, and being a land use plan, as you would expect, this is the framework upon which everything else hangs. It contains very important information in relation to housing land supply issues, which Mr Moody has referred to already. There are provisions in respect of business development, infrastructure, and very importantly, the green space elements of the area in which we live as well. The policies are the detailed policies which apply throughout the plan area, and they cover the themes described in paragraph 410 of the report around place, environment, jobs economy, infrastructure, as I've touched on already. The settlement statements themselves contain the detailed provisions in respect of each of the settlements which comprise our area, and these are described in paragraph 412 of the report onwards. There are specific provisions in each, particularly around housing, whether that's to identify new housing opportunities or whether that's to focus on delivering existing areas that have previously been identified for housing, or indeed a combination of the two. At paragraph 415, you will see that, for example, in Denny, that the existing sites are the focus of growth in the area, but there are issues associated with growth related to infrastructure, particularly deer, which members have previously considered, and things like school capacity. So these are all linked in our area. Our Falkirk area, there are areas, specific new areas identified for housing that are coming forward from Wood End Farm and from opportunities within the Gateway site, but there are also specific provisions in relation to commercial activity and reference to infrastructure in the TIF programme. Whilst in Grangemouth, the economic importance of Grangemouth, not only to our area but indeed to the country itself, is reflected in our plan, and there is reference in our plan to our emerging investment zone proposals. So all in all, we've captured everything, I hope, and I hope that members will be happy to debate this afternoon. There is an action programme associated with the plan, as you would expect, for something that runs to quite tight timescales, and that's included as in Appendix 2, to the report. Once approved today by members, the plan will be published and will be available for a period of 8 weeks consultation. Now, that's what we are proposing. You'll see in the report that we do make reference to the consideration of this being over a holiday period, so we've suggested that's why it's 2 weeks more than the 6-week minimum. Now, obviously, given the uncertainty as to when this meeting was going to take place, I think we've taken a view that we should just leave the 8-week period. I'm, as you know, very keen to consult as long as we can on these things. It's clearly, as the Provost said, a very important part of the work of the Council, and I think we should encourage as long as possible for the responses to come back. And that 8-week period has been included in our plan for delivery. The process thereafter is described in paragraph 5.2 of the report. The Council has an opportunity to make modifications based on the consultation responses within limits, and thereafter the plan will be referred to the Scottish Ministers, where we will undergo an examination thereof, and with adoption being expected in 2020. Further on in the report, we have undertaken significant examination in respect of equalities and poverty impact, as you would expect, and there has been a strategic environmental assessment undertaken as well in relation to the plan. In conclusion, Provost, I commend the report to members for consideration this afternoon, and myself and my colleagues will be happy to answer any questions, hopefully, that you have. Thank you.
Okay, could I just say at this stage that I would like to thank Mrs Geisler, Alistair Shaw and the team for the hard work that they put in for this LDP, not just in the past few months, but in the past few years, to bring this forward to us today. It's a very important document, and I can't stress enough what Mrs Geisler was saying in terms of the public consultation. And it's important that our communities, if they want to have an input, is then to ensure that they have that input and they don't wait until the horses come out the door. Because public consultation is public consultation, and that's an opportunity for the public to get involved, and hopefully they'll do this over the 8-week period. I now ask Mr Shaw, would you like to come in and say a few words, Mr Shaw?
Provost, I don't think I've got anything to add at this stage. We'll just wait and see if, what questions arise. Thanks.
Any questions from members in relation to the initial overview from Mrs Geisler? Councillor Reid.
Yes, please, Provost. I won't take up much time. I've got 6 very quick points. Page 20 in the book, and that refers to the Falkirk Gateway site, which has laid sterile for the last 10 years. And it's the recommendation is there for emphasis on placemaking, leisure and tourism. Does that exclude any form of retail other than that for leisure and tourism? Because obviously, otherwise it'd be a threat to the town centres of Falkirk and Grangemouth. That's the first question. Do you want them all at once, Rona? Or?
I think.
Right. Okay. Right, okay. Thanks.
Subject to qualification from Mr Shaw, there is a provision for appropriate levels of retail within the Gateway development, and that would be associated, as you've described, with those uses. Alternatively, other retail may be considered, but that would all be subject to the town centre first principles. So that, we are conscious more than ever of the importance of the supporting our town centres. So retail opportunities, depending on what they were, would be either, as I say, directly associated with these uses or something which would not be possible to go elsewhere, i.e. where a town centre location would not be suitable.
Okay, thank you. I think the remainder will be as brief as that, Provost. The next one does concern the town centre. That's Falkirk Town Centre. Page 48. There's reference to, let me see now, if someone puts in a planning application that the contribution to education and open space will be waived in certain cases. Is that available at the moment, that particular concession? Should someone ask to build houses, for example, in the town centre?
At the moment, we have rules on contributions to in respect of residential development for education and open space, and these would be applied according to the current rules to any development within the town centre. It's obviously it's open to members of the planning committee to whatever weight they want to attach to that in respect of any development, but that is part of the development plan. It's enshrined in supplementary guidance. So this is a shift. This is an attempt to facilitate residential development by removing that burden.
And presumably the planning committee would take into account the emerging local plan, one assumes. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Page 88. That's concerning this building, in fact, or this building site would be more accurate. It talks about possible improvements to the pathways behind the building, going past Leetsfield to St Mungo's, basically. Who would undertake that? Would that be a developer, or would the council be taking the initiative on that one?
I'll try and pick that one up if I may. It really depends on the nature of the development, what would be appropriate. As you know, the council is very successful in attracting external funding for our paths network. So this is on our radar for that purpose, although obviously we wouldn't want to include something that wouldn't be suitable for future use, it wouldn't be future-proofed. So I think it would be a combination of things. Really, the purpose of this is just really to alert any future developer that this would be sought as part of the package, but in terms of its delivery, it wouldn't be restricted necessarily to that. We're obviously very keen to improve links from everywhere in the Falkirk general area into the town centre, and particularly from canal side, and particularly because of the potential reopening of the Rosebank site. So these are all opportunities that we're identifying as part of the plan, but in terms of delivery, it will be whichever is the most expeditious way to deliver that.
Thank you. Next one, there's a reference to Falkirk bus station. as it was. And there's a plea there that the Art Deco work be preserved in any future development. Falkirk has a lot of Art Deco, which is slowly disappearing. I take it that would be a condition of any planning condition should the bus station be redeveloped.
It's once enshrined in the LDP, it's obviously very persuasive in terms of planning conditions, as you've suggested. And the other thing that happens, and Mr Shaw's made reference to this already, we have supplementary planning guidance which would flow from the new LDP, and these are the sorts of things that we would capture in that.
Just two to go, Provost. Appendix 1, and it's the proposed housing at Westburn Avenue, the former hospital site. As we know, that site has lain empty for some 5 or 6 years. I wondered if NHS had any plans that we know about that might affect the LDP, in fact. That might do away with housing and put something in its place.
I think at the moment we're waiting for confirmation from the Health Board that they have determined the site, the exact boundaries of the site that they wish to, that is surplus to their requirements, and I don't think they've come to that point yet. They have given a commitment to prepare a development brief and a master plan in conjunction with us once they have that confirmation. So it's really just it's waiting on the landowner really to confirm that.
Just as we all know, there's a screaming need for housing for the elderly population, which is increasing rapidly, and that seems the ideal site for it. Can NHS be asked to put a crudely extract a digit at all? Okay. Politely, of course. Another site that was aspirational and was that at Portdowney, and it's in the proposals and opportunities schedule on A10. Just again an update as to what is happening there or is not happening.
The site, in terms of the plan, as you mentioned, is protected as a future aspiration. The site has significant infrastructure constraints in terms, particularly of its contamination. However, it remains as part of the canal corridor plans. It's a key element of that. So I've already mentioned Rosebank Distillery, and there's also the funding recently that was secured by the Council in partnership with Scottish Canals to redevelop the old Bars factory and Antiquates, which is actually called Union Inn, I think, formerly. And so these are all assisting to lift the area. So we are confident that in due course that development will come forward, but there are obviously significant challenges associated with it. The investment zone plans that members will be familiar with have a significant element of tourism development in them, and we're hoping that that may assist in delivering this site in the longer term. So that's why it's protected in the plan.
Thank you, Provost. I'd like to share your congratulations to the staff for all their work. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Spears.
Thank you. It's also page 20, and it's 320, and it regards table 3.3, Grangemouth Investment Zone. It'd be very amiss of me as a local member not to reverberate the concerns of the public regarding this, especially regarding the open space policy in Grangemouth and Glensborough. I'm sure there will be great cognizance taken today that this is the biggest secondary population and that the people in that area certainly want to enjoy a quality of life and not be seen as just an industrial unit. I'll leave that with you and move on to 3.22, tourism. On your chart, 3.4, you've got Helix and Falkirk Gateway, which tends to omit Grangemouth. And this is concerning as we have just had a major tourist boost with the Charlotte and the Dash Trail that takes you almost into the heart of the old Grangemouth. And I'll leave it there. I'm sure I've gave Grangemouth a considerable mention, and that Falkirk Gateway doesn't mean Grangemouth exit.
Thank you very much for your input, Councillor Spears. Is there any officer like to respond to the comments made in relation to Councillor Spears' input? Thank you.
I'm very happy to take these on board. The Grangemouth investment zone will be something which members will be discussing at great length in the future, and I'm sure that we'll be capturing all of the views of the people of Grangemouth, so I'll be looking forward to hearing more about that.
My colleague, Councillor Reid, made mention of the Westburn site and, of course, the former hospital site, well, that's present, the Falkirk Hospital. In any further plans that are coming forward, would it be possible for officers to have a look at the use, whether or not it requires an incinerator? Now, it's kind of loosely attached to this, but the reason I'm saying that is the incinerator there was out of use for quite some period of time, given that there had been a major problem with it. And I'm still taking complaints today. Recently there's been an uptake, smoke and smell coming from the chimney, and I'm not entirely sure, I could be wrong, but I don't think they've really got the rights to be using that after the last carry on. I've brought it to the attention of other officers, but it's just in any future plan we should be aware that the incinerator based exactly where it is causes problems, understandably.
Any comments on that, or were we just looking into the issue? You've noted that, it's fine. Councillor Colley, thank you.
It's on page 24, 3.29, education and healthcare. There's a recognition of some of the issues around primary healthcare, particularly in Denny, Bonnybridge and Banknock. And I noted there's no site-specific solutions have yet been agreed, but I wondered if you could maybe advise of any discussions that are happening with the Health Board as to how, obviously, the buildings are potentially problematic. I'm aware there's an issue around GP recruitment, but there's a more specific issue around the buildings themselves and whether there's sufficient capacity to expand and deliver different types of healthcare.
As Mr Shaw mentioned, we are in discussion with Health Board in relation to the plan around a number of specific sites. That's two of which have been or specific areas, two of which have been discussed this afternoon. So we continue to have those conversations, but it really is for the health service to determine where they are intended where they intend to deliver services, and we would be able to respond to that. So I'll pick that up in the discussions that we're having with them.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Provost. I'll keep it short because I think this is basically the introductory motion that allows the debate for the issues that members have brought forward and the groups have brought forward. But it would be remiss of me not to join with the comments that have been made with regards to the work done by Rona Geisler and her staff at Development Services, particularly Alistair. We're very fortunate to have Alistair with us. He's a first-class officer who knows the planning process inside out. So very grateful to Alistair for all the hours we spent together. I think some people were getting a wee bit jealous, but I can assure you that we're all best friends. The local plan itself, the development plan, is probably the most important document that the Council will produce over the next few years. It's the template for business, it's the template for industry, for commerce, for house building. It's a template for so much that ensures that the planning process is open and inclusive as possible. It's the document that should be and is regarded as the Bible by anyone with a planning background, anyone with the planning as their interests. And quite rightly so, because it's the document that, as I say, keeps the local authority in touch with the developments outside, and keeps the developments outside in touch with local authority. It gives the clarity when it's implemented correctly. It gives clarity when at this stage with regards to intentions, and it gives clarity in an overall context. So with that, I would formally move the following. One, that we're approving the proposed Falkirk Local Development Plan 2 and proposed action programme with the adjustments made by Council today at today's meeting, and 2, agreeing that consultation on the proposed plan is adjusted and undertaken in accordance with the relevant legislation and guidelines. And just to say that the 8-week proposal is, I think, sensible. The 6 weeks, I think, is just too tight. 8 weeks, I think, is more appropriate. And I believe that, I sincerely hope that all local members will agree to that, because it's important that, first of all, we recognise the process of the improvement in this plan. We recognise the importance of the plan to not just the officers of Falkirk Council, not just to the members of Falkirk Council, but to the people of Falkirk and District. So we need to keep it going forward at a reasonable pace, but we must ensure that consultation is not lost in that particular consideration. So with that, I would formally move the motion.
Provost, thank you. Can I just thank our colleagues across the chamber for their cooperation, and yourself in bringing forward amendments and sharing those as early as possible. I know that there's been a lot of last-minute work, and thanks to officers for their time and guidance in getting us to where we are today. I think that the plan today, while there's going to be areas where we'll probably agree or disagree, and the alterations that come forward, ultimately I think we still have a plan that will meet our corporate objectives, create the economic drivers to deliver thriving and sustainable communities and a vibrant economy for the Falkirk area. So I'm more than happy to second my colleague's proposal, subject to the adjustments that I think will now head directly into.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to revert back to Mr Moody then to take us through the amendments. Thank you, Mr Moody.
Yes, thank you, Provost. The amendments are as set out in the paper distributed, and I think the first of these is to be moved by Councillor Alexander.
Thank you, Provost, and thank you to Colin as well. The first amendment we propose is to reduce the housing supply target from 480 to 450 units. So over the 5-year term of the plan, that will be a reduction in the targets of 150 houses in total. That's quite simply to recognise, first of all, that when other local authorities were looking to stand still, Falkirk was looking to expand. And we're one of the few local authority areas where we have expanded the population in the past few years. And it's because Falkirk Council went for growth that we have a situation now where the sites perhaps aren't as frequently available as they were in the past. Also have a considerable number of sites that have been approved by the committee and which remain undeveloped, and that perhaps is a separate issue, but is one which has to be taken into consideration. Also, it gives us an opportunity, I think, to maximise the benefits that we'll see from increased development by the public sector in housing. Windfall sites we predict will rise, and this is because of the fact that the local authorities may find opportunities that the private sector couldn't or perhaps wouldn't in relation to the development of more public sector housing than we've had in the past. It's something that we have to be conscious of, and it's something that I certainly welcome, and I believe the whole Council welcomes. So with that, I would firmly move, Convener, that the target for housing supply be reduced from 480 to 450 units.
Formally second.
Provost. I think that takes us then to the second of the proposals, which relates to Gilston, and I think that's from Councillor Nicholl.
Thank you, Provost. First of all, there can't be very many meetings that we've been 40 minutes into the meeting and have agreed with every word that has been spoken today. First of all, the congratulations from all the members who have spoken for Rona and her team, particularly Alistair, for the work done in the last months and indeed, as you point out, years in bringing this document forward today. Now, I know it must be very infuriating for Alistair in particular that members do have a bad habit of leaving everything to the last minute, and I'm sure that he has been burning the midnight oil over the last few weeks in particular, but I do pay a special acknowledgement to the work and the assistance that Alistair has shown me, members of my group, and I'm quite sure members across the chamber in the work. We are very proud to have you, as the portfolio holder said, Alistair. I hope the unanimity that I spoke of continues, Provost, when I move what I'm about to move in regard to Gilston. Gilston has, as long as I have been the member for Polmont, a site which has been certainly zoned for industrial use, but happily still enjoys the benefit of providing green fields and at the appropriate time of the year lambs playing on it as a natural edge to Polmont. Over the years, people have told me every time I go round doors that they cannot believe that anybody would be willing to sacrifice this ground for more housing and putting more pressure on particularly Gilston Crescent, on the school, of course, which, should the proposals as contained within the original LDP go forward, would inevitably mean a three-tier school, and even for less proposals would well mean the provision of huts at the site. That is something that I certainly cannot support, not only in regard to St Margaret's School, Provost, but the fact that, particularly for Polmont members, Adana and myself, no Alan's unfortunately ill today, parking at Polmont Station has been a very contentious issue for many years, and I cannot believe that this wouldn't do anything other than greatly exacerbate that problem. The health centre also, members will be well aware of the waiting times there and the difficulty in, first of all, getting onto a doctor's list, and then for the length of time getting appointments. Now, I know these facilities are shared with other areas, but I speak today not just as the leader of my group, but as a local member for the Polmont area. And in doing so, I have to convey honestly the facts that I hear day in, day out regarding this proposal from the people that send me here to represent them. And primarily that is what they say. They say that they are content that the site is used to provide employment. They see housing in other areas growing. Where are these people going to get jobs? So they do recognise that there is a need for employment in the area. But the housing element is something that greatly concerns them and indeed concerns me also, Provost. So today I am going to move that the motion that is on the papers that we have here to amend the proposed use of the site at Gilston Polmont, proposal NU06, as shown on the map below, from mixed-use development, including up to 500 houses and business land, to exclusively business use with no housing. Now, some people may say, Provost, that some minor use of housing may be acceptable, and perhaps, who knows, safeguard the other element of the ground. I rather feel I've considered that proposal, and I've considered it seriously, and I've spoken to various officers about that. I also, as you know only too well, Provost, have served for many, many years on the planning committee, and I do appreciate that once a precedent is set, once a foot is in the door, it is very hard to stop future development. So I feel that the 150 houses that is in the next proposal, whilst I accept that it was put forward in good faith, I cannot support it today simply because I do believe that it would be just that, a foot in the door, and would inevitably lead to the eventual loss of the whole of this site. So it is not that I have not considered it. I consider all options that come forward from colleagues, take advice on it, and that is the conclusion that I have come to, Provost, that I will hold the line today and move that no housing at all be permitted on the site at Gilson. Thank you.
Have we got a seconder for your motion?
I'll second that, Provost.
Just a point of information, can I ask how much the considerable cost of infrastructure into this area has been so far?
I'm not sure that I have that to hand. Obviously, it's something that the developer would have information from, but I can certainly get it.
I think it's worth noting that that was developer paid.
Okay, then we have a...
Provost, yes, I don't want to be the one that breaks the consensus, but we do have a concern, and Councillor Nicholl at least has recognised that our proposal in the next column is well-meaning. We recently had a public local hearing in the area where it was very clear that, first of all, that the local people would prefer no development whatsoever within that or certainly those who attended the public hearing. Made that crystal clear, and I accept that. My concern is that where the foothold actually comes, where the foothold is in the door, to hold that door open actually comes. Does it come with the proposal for the 500? Does it come within the proposal for 150, or is it already there in the shape of past local plan developments and local plan proposals? Because there has been a precedent in the past, and that precedent was that I believe 150 houses in the Pomont local plan. And certainly in the development plan we have at the moment, there's no proposals for housing, but in the past there has been. And our concern is that while the developer wants 500, that if we don't seek a compromise, then the ruling will go against Falkirk Council, and the 500 will become the reality. And it will become the reality on an unattributed basis. So there will be no benefit to local authority coming back. It will be a yes or no. There will be probably no Section 75 the gains for the community. And I'd just like to ask the Director if she believes that would be a genuine concern that we have, and because it's certainly the concern that we have, that we could find an alternative before us, enforced by the Reporters Unit, to open up land which has previously been identified in part for housing.
There is a current planning application with the Council which will be considered by members at some point soon. If that application were to be refused by members, obviously the applicant would have a right of appeal, and that matter would be then considered by a reporter appointed by the Reporters Unit Scottish Government. Appeals work in Scotland on the basis of the application being considered what's known as de novo, which means in its entirety all over again from the beginning, and as a consequence of which it will be entirely within the hands of the reporter to determine the outcome of that appeal. The reporters have regard to all relevant considerations, as indeed does anyone in a planning authority, and that will include the past history of a site. So I hope that answers your question.
I think, Provost, that's confirmed our concerns, is that we may lose control over this process, and what we may see in Gilson would be significantly more houses than any of us believe the site can really accommodate. And that's why I have to move the direct negative to this particular proposal as outlined by Councillor Nicholl. I do accept much of what Councillor Nicholl has said, but unless we can get the concerns that we have with regards to the processes agreed and in a way that protects that community from wholly, and I say wholly, overdevelopment proposal in terms of the local plan, the SDP, the local plan for us today. So with that, Provost, I formally move the direct negative.
Before we carry on with the debate, just to say that members may not appreciate what the procedure is in terms of any disagreements. Well, that's the second one we're at, and obviously there's a disagreement already. Mr Moody, would just like to explain what the procedure will be as we go through at the very beginning, so everybody's got an understanding.
Yes. Thank you, Provost. The agreed procedure for this is, I think, to decide each of these proposed adjustments to the plan individually. And in this case, we have a clear example where there isn't general agreement among the council members on the proposal made by Councillor Nicholl. Accordingly, after any debate or questions among members, there will be a division, and the division will be either for or against Councillor Nicholl's proposal to delete the housing element from the Gilston site.
Okay, thank you for your clarity.
I'm happy to second my colleague's direct negative.
Thank you, Provost. And just as a reminder, the vote is for or against for Councillor Nicholl's proposal to delete the housing element or against. Provost Buchanan.
For.
Deputy Provost Ritchie.
Against.
Councillor Aitchison. Councillor Alexander. Yes. Councillor Balfour. Against. Councillor Binney. Councillor Bissett. Councillor Black. Councillor Blackwood. Councillor Bowes. Councillor Coleman. Councillor Colley. Councillor Coombs. Councillor Flynn. Councillor Garner. Councillor Goldie. Councillor Grant. Councillor Harris. Councillor Hughes. Councillor Kerr. Councillor McHugh. Councillor McCluckie. Councillor Meiklejohn. Councillor Monroe. Councillor Murtagh. Councillor Nicholl. Councillor Patrick. Councillor Reid. Councillor Spears. Provost, there were 16 votes for, there were 13 votes against, and Councillor Nicholl's proposal is accordingly agreed. Provost, that would then otherwise take us on to the second adjustment in relation to Gilston, but given that the first proposal has been agreed to reduce the housing to nil, the second Gilston proposal is accordingly superseded, and we would move on to the Crawfield Road adjustment, which I think again is Councillor Alexander.
Okay, thank you, Mr Moody.
Thanks again, Provost. The issues regarding Crawfield Road, I'm sure the Deputy Provost will fill in more details than I can. Essentially, the Crawfield Road site is we believe, detrimental to the Bowness community in the sense that it represents a grossly overdevelopment proposal. And so it's with that I formally move that the site be withdrawn from the plan.
Thanks, Provost. I would formally second Councillor Alexander. Just feel that there's other areas in Bowness that are better fitted for more housing at this time. I'm glad it's going to be going out for consultation, and it brings more constituents in to know, but formal second.
Yeah, Provost, I'm very happy to support this motion as well. I think it would be no economic benefit to Bowness whatsoever. I think the business, the site where it is, I think the people who are residing there would go elsewhere. And I also agree with Deputy Provost Ritchie that there are other areas within Bowness, more around the town centre area, that could do with development rather than this area on the outskirts of Bowness.
So, Alexander, seconded by the Deputy Provost Ritchie. And is there anybody in any disagreement, or would you like to come into the debate at this stage? Are we quite content that everybody's in agreement? Because I need you to speak to me. Are we agreed? Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Provost. The next of the proposals relates to Maddiston Fire Station, and I believe that may be Councillor Goldie.
Thanks, Provost. It's just to say that the community in Maddiston would be quite happy for the motion to go forward. It's amending the mixed-use proposal at the former Maddiston Fire Station site, proposal MU07, as shown in the map below, to a business site for community, retail and employment uses, but excluding housing. So move.
Somebody coming in behind you there. We got a second. Right, okay. We've got 44 seconds. There's this young man here.
Only second.
Thank you, Provost, which takes us on to the next proposal in relation to inserting a housing proposal at Cumbernauld Road at Longcroft. And I think that may be Councillor Blackwood.
Thanks, Provost. Provost, this is a small development along Cumbernauld Road in Longcroft, to a maximum of 10 units. It's in the grounds of a small holding, and directly opposite these grounds there's a development that was on a small holding, so I see no reason why this should not be agreed upon. I'm happy to move it.
Convener, I'll second that.
Yes, Provost. This particular site is relatively small, but it is significantly placed, and we felt it inappropriate that we go forward with this within the development plan. No doubt my colleague will have more to say than I will at this point, so I'll wait for the local member's viewpoint.
Thank you, Provost. First of all, I'd like to ask Alistair Shaw, if I may. I believe this site has come before for the call for sites, and I'd like to ask his thoughts on this proposed site first before I expand a wee bit on my thoughts.
Well, perhaps if I could, all the sites that come in through the call for sites process and are assessed through the local development plan, we do a full site assessment, and the conclusion of the site assessment we carried out was that the site didn't represent a logical rounding off of the urban area, and it could create a precedent for further unplanned growth, incremental growth along the south side of Cumbernauld Road. So that was the principal reason. It doesn't form a kind of logical extension to the urban area. There's also a sort of a further concern about that it's located within the Antonine Wall World Heritage Site buffer zone. Now, that would require a detailed assessment to see if there is a real impact, but it's certainly it's a factor, a further factor that we took into account in considering that the site might not be appropriate.
Thank you for that, Alistair. On the back of that, I'd like to raise my concerns in the LDP2. It states in Bonnybridge and Banknock, growth to be focused on existing committed sites. That's in 4.13, notably the large-scale sites. Now, our ward has got a lot of developments coming up in the near future, which obviously includes Banknock as well, and Hags and Longcroft. But this site in particular has a long historic case of being used as a rat run. And I think all members are pretty aware of that case. We actually had a pretty heated meeting not that too long ago, where there was lots of residents in attendance, and the proposer of this, Councillor Blackwood, was there. So I'm quite surprised this site has been brought forward. So yeah, I'm happy to second it, and yes, I'm against this proposal coming forward.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to add to what Councillor Gardner says. I think probably on a monthly basis, residents are at the community council are complaining about speeding on that road. I have asked for traffic calming. I think it's not a site that fits with what they want, and I think actually we should be focusing on developing the big sites to provide the much needed social and affordable housing that people in Banknock are crying out for.
Okay, we've had some councillors in debate. Is there anybody else like to come in? Have we got any lights here? Nope. We'll just clarify where we are. We've got a motion moved and seconded. We've got a disagreement to that motion by a number of other councillors. So I think we'll just, if anybody else doesn't want to come in, we're just going to go to the split. We're going to the split? Okay, go to the split. Thank you.
Thank you, Provost. And just to confirm again, the vote is for or against the proposal by Councillor Blackwood to insert the new housing site at Longcroft. Provost Buchanan.
For.
Deputy Provost Ritchie.
Against.
Councillor Aitchison. Councillor Alexander. Councillor Balfour. Councillor Binney. Councillor Bissett. Councillor Black. Councillor Blackwood. Councillor Bowes. Councillor Coleman. Councillor Colley. Councillor Coombs. Councillor Flynn. Councillor Garner. Councillor Goldie. Councillor Grant. Councillor Harris. Councillor Hughes. Councillor Kerr. Councillor McHugh. Councillor McCluckie. Councillor Meiklejohn. Councillor Monroe. Councillor Murtagh. Councillor Nicholl. Councillor Patrick. Councillor Reid. Councillor Spears.
Against.
Thank you, Provost. There were 16 votes for and 13 votes against, and Councillor Blackwood's proposal is accordingly agreed. Yes, thank you, Provost. This takes us to the proposal in relation to the Haining and Park Hall Farm at Maddiston to reinstate the housing sites as in the existing LDP, and I believe that's Councillor Goldie.
Yeah. As you say, Mr Moody, it's just a technical amendment, basically, as you said it, to include the sites of Park Hall Farm and the Haining Maddiston, as shown on the map below, as proposals for residential development in the proposed plan. This represents the carrying forward of these sites from the LDP1. So as I say, it's technical, it's been approved before, but needs approval again.
Takes us, Provost, to the proposal in relation to Ferry Road at South Alloa, which is to insert a new housing proposal. I believe that may be Councillor Nicholl.
Yeah, thank you, Provost. As in the case of Gilson, I recognise that there are genuine disagreements, just because people think differently, and that's good and that's healthy. And I thoroughly accept and expect that on this one, people will have different views from myself on it. In South Alloa, Provost, and I'm sure you know it well, there was a former, I'm not quite sure if you'd call it a brickworks, because it used to make concrete blocks, called Thermalite. The site is now obviously a brownfield site. It's a bit of an eyesore, a real mess. The idea that has come forward is to help mitigate the appearance of this site by allowing a very limited number of houses to be built there. We recognise that the site, whilst the site can take a lot of houses, perhaps the village of South Alloa cannot, because it's limited in its infrastructure. And of course there are issues also there regarding schools and roads, and we recognise that. However, I am happy to bring this proposal forward today for members' consideration. I think that allowing up to 20 houses would perhaps certainly regenerate that frontage and make it a lot nicer for everyone. So that really is the basis of moving to include a site at Ferry Road, South Alloa, as shown in the map below, as a proposal for residential developments in the proposed plan. And the form of words that Alistair has given doesn't include a limit to 20 houses, but Alistair, I think I would like to do that. Is that okay? To limit it to 20 houses in the motion. I know you mentioned it in detail.
I think I'm just reading the motion here, and under the site comments, the wording would be the scale of housing would be limited to 20 to ensure it's appropriate to the scale of the village.
Okay, because I think that's very, very important. Alistair's final words there is to recognise the scale of this to the village. So a maximum of 20 houses, purely to get the site.
Yes, I would like to second that. Thank you.
If anybody wants to come into the debate here, Councillor Spears.
Just out of interest, who is the owner of that property? Now, I used to have a family member who had land in there, and I don't know if they've got land or not, so maybe I should declare a non-pecuniary interest.
Sorry, Provost, it's not information that I have to hand on the land ownership, but I don't know if my colleagues from Development Services might do.
Provost, as a longest served member of the Council, I would always advise a colleague, if they're unsure whether they should declare an interest or not, then they should declare interest and take part.
Clear a non-pecuniary interest.
Questions of interest, Provost, are obviously matters for the members themselves, but in the absence of any information suggesting that there is an interest, I don't see an obvious difficulty.
It's always very difficult to know one's family involvement in business, but I think Councillor Goldie's right. If there is any debate and you're unsure, then you should declare an interest.
Thanks, Provost. I'm in disagreement with what Councillor Nicholl said. I've spoken to the Community Council about this on various occasions, and they see no benefit at all to building on this site. I agree with the officers that I think that the risk of flooding on that site is extremely high. I'm just looking here just now. SEPA flood maps show that almost all of the site is within the medium to high flood risk category, and I think that would just add to the flooding issues that are quite prevalent in that area at the moment. The other issue, of course, is the schools, as has been alluded to about Gilston. Larbert High School and Airth Primary School are both at capacity at the moment, and there's pressures on there. I think that the other issue is obviously the traffic across Airth Main Street is already an issue for the villagers, and I think that the danger in allocating this as a site would undermine our general housing strategy in the whole Larbert area. I understand that Councillor Nicholl's saying limit it to 20 houses, but it's a huge site, and we are aware that in the past, if you allocate a site for housing, then developers will see that as an open door and can push against it. The size of that site itself could accommodate up to 150 houses. And I think that for me is a big red warning light. I think it's a very small village, it's remote from any facilities, and I just don't think that it's sustainable. I think there is an option whereby they could put an amendment in to extend the village limit and change the greenfield, brownfield lines, and I think that perhaps might be a way forward that the developer might look like, but I don't think we should put it in the LDP for housing at the moment.
Thank you for your contribution. Councillor Murtagh, I think, was first.
Just clarify, Councillor Kim's formally proposing the direct negative?
Sorry. Direct negative.
Yeah. Okay. In which case, I'm happy to second that. I think, although I agree with Councillor Nicholl on many points that he's raised in terms of there not being, there aren't many sites that can be proposed within, particularly in Carskinhead and Christ, and that this is indeed a bit of an eyesore. I think that at this particular site, because of flooding issues, because of the lack of infrastructure, and also because of the capacity that the schools are at, would make it a very difficult site. I think that if it's possible that if a small development could be put there, then that might be well good. But I think 20 houses or something which we're not aware of the scale of what that site could actually take is perhaps not the best to include within the LDP2 at this stage. For those reasons, I would oppose it.
Thank you. Okay, just to clarify, we have motions and disagreement with direct negative. Is there anything else like to come in before we go to the split? No? Go to the split.
Thank you, Provost. And just to confirm again, this is a vote for or against the proposal to insert the housing site at Ferry Road, South Alloa. For. Sorry, I beg your pardon. How to start in the wrong column. It's been a long afternoon. I'll start again. Provost Buchanan. Deputy Provost Ritchie.
Against.
Councillor Aitchison. Councillor Alexander.
Against.
Councillor Balfour.
Against.
Councillor Binney.
Against.
Councillor Bissett.
Against.
Councillor Black.
Against.
Councillor Blackwood.
Against.
Councillor Bowes.
Against.
Councillor Coleman.
Against.
Councillor Colley.
Against.
Councillor Coombs.
Against.
Councillor Flynn.
For.
Councillor Garner.
Against.
Councillor Goldie.
For the amendment.
Councillor Grant.
For.
Councillor Harris.
For.
Councillor Hughes.
Against.
Councillor Kerr.
For the amendment.
Councillor McHugh.
Against.
Councillor McCluskey.
Abstain.
Councillor Meiklejohn.
Against.
Councillor Monroe.
For.
Councillor Murtagh.
Against.
Councillor Nicholl.
For.
Councillor Patrick.
For.
Councillor Reid.
Against.
And Councillor Spears.
Abstain. I'll declare the notice.
Thank you, Provost. There were 9 votes for the proposal, 18 against and 2 abstentions. So the proposal is not agreed. That takes us, Provost, to the proposal in relation to Gateside Bonnybridge to reinstate the housing site as was in the LDP1, and I believe, Provost, that may be yourself. No.
Thank you. Provost, one of the joys of the planning process, and one we should always cherish, is that people have different opinions and everybody's entitled to their opinion. So the last vote showed that people in here are of independent mind when it comes to these things, so that's very positive. In regard to the site at Gateside Bonnybridge, Provost, in the ward of Laverton Bonnybridge, I would like to move to include the site at Gateside Bonnybridge as shown on the map below as a proposal for mixed-use development, including a nursing home and a sports and recreation facilities in the proposed plan, and to exclude the site from the green belt. I believe that's the current status of the site, Provost.
I'll second that, Provost. Thank you. Councillor Alexander.
Yes, Provost. I recall attending a hearing in Bonnybridge Primary School a number of years ago with regards to this particular proposal, a very similar proposal for a multi-facility within the site. It didn't happen, and it didn't happen for a reason, and that reason is there's a gas pipeline runs right through the site, which effectively sterilises that particular site. Now, I think it's important that we don't include it at this stage, because when we look at the consideration for Local Development Plan 1, for example, we made it clear that the whole process is one of opportunities for all sectors within the local authority area, for the private sector in terms of their ability, and for local authorities in terms of our commitment towards services and facilities, both for leisure and recreation and for housing. But it keeps coming back to this gas pipeline that runs through the full site. We know we can't develop over that pipeline. We know that there has to be an exclusion zone from that pipeline, which makes this site particularly unattractive for developers. Perhaps someday then that may change for us. There may be that change that brings about development which would be essential for the wider community, or desirable for the wider community. But that date is some considerable time away. We have a responsibility to flag up sites which have realistic proposals for development. We have that responsibility to our citizens, we have that responsibility to developers. It's important that we meet that obligation. It's important that the document that we put forward is genuine opportunities for site and for the usage of those sites. So with that, Provost, I would say that perhaps in the future I'd be happy to support this particular proposal, but it's not something that's going to happen in the next few years. It's some considerable time away, and until that date I think it's important that or until we get the change in infrastructure within that area, the gas pipeline is removed or moved or whatever, declared redundant, whatever, then we have a realistic, credible development plan to put forward to the community, to the private sector and to the public sector. And I think that probably this is a step too far on this particular development site. So I hope that will be recognised, that we're not saying never, not saying never for never. We are saying that it's unreasonable and almost undevelopable at this particular stage because of that pipeline. So with that, Provost, I'll formally move the negative.
Thank you. I must have spoken before to the officers in relation to this over the years when we talk about legacy applications. The issue in terms of an update, even as we speak, is the fact of the matter is that it's the officers looking at it would say the same as yourself, it might be unsurmountable. But this company in the latest correspondence that's been coming in is that they're working, even at this moment, they spent £400,000. We've got an email in, they spent £400,000. They've got a consultant working on it just now, and they're hopeful that they can overcome this. what's been proposed, and I would support it, is that we put it back in. As you say, we were at a PDH for this. There was quite a big crowd there. I think there was 1,600 people in the community had signed a petition. And basically, mainly on the factors about the planning gain that the community was going to get for it. The fact of the matter is if there was nothing that had been coming in lately and it sort of been like had died in the water, then I would be one of the first persons to say, well, look, let's take this out of the local plan. It's not going anywhere. But we've got copies of emails in, and maybe Mr Shaw will maybe come into this one, where they have stated that they are continually working with consultants to try and overcome it. What I'm saying is that it goes back in and we just wait until it's finally, we know that it's never going to happen. Maybe Mr Shaw would come in and maybe tell us any latest information coming for the applicant. Thank you.
Thank you, Provost. We have had correspondence from the promoter of the site. To date, they just as background, I think, as Councillor Alexander has said, the major constraint facing the site is 2 high-pressure pipelines running through the site, and the consultation zones associated with those affect nearly all of the site and very, very severely limit the scope for development. There are potential solutions. You can divert pipelines, or you can thicken the walls, which might reduce that constraint, but these are extremely high-cost items, and given the time that's elapsed, we felt that it was unlikely that this constraint was going to satisfactorily be addressed in the period of the plan. So that's why we, as officers, we recommended it be taken out. In terms of the most recent correspondence I've had from the promoter, he says he started engaging with the Health and Safety Executive, but I think it's fair to say that the discussions haven't really got all that far. I think he's aware, the promoter is aware of some of the options, but none of these have been tested yet. And the HSE will be happy to if there is a solution, if there is a proposal, for instance, to thicken the wall of the pipe, they're quite happy to model that and see what the impact is. But that's as far as things have got so far.
Just thank you, Provost. I just wanted to formally second Councillor Alexander, but also to draw colleagues' attention to the fact that this is a World Heritage Site buffer zone. We have discussed the issues with the gas pipeline and the possibility of technology or perhaps changing the direction of the pipeline, but we cannot affect the fact that it is a World Heritage Site, and I, for one, feel that is a significant impediment to development in that area. Thank you.
Just a couple of procedural points, Provost. If we were to approve this inclusion and the public consultation was against it, do we, at the final meeting, have a chance to change our mind? Or is this concluded today?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the procedure, what will happen when we receive representations, the Council prepares a response to those recommendations, and so this will come back to the Council, and the responses will be approved. The Council is at liberty to change the proposed plan at that stage. What the implication, if the change is what's called a notifiable modification, in other words, if it's a substantial one, and taking out or putting in a substantial proposal would be a notifiable modification, that would mean that we would have to re-advertise the whole plan. So it's possible, but it has programming implications, shall I say.
It was just a general point. It applies to everything we're doing this month. The other thing was, if we put it in, that would be, I think, an extra 200 houses. And in view of the first motion to reduce the annual number of houses, it would take up half a year's supply of houses if we were to include this. Am I correct in that assumption?
I think that would the answer to that question really comes down to whether we consider it to be an effective site. I think, given the constraints facing it at the moment and the lack of evidence that those can be overcome, we might be hard-pressed to argue that the site is an effective one. We'd have to take a view on that. I think the fact that officers have recommended that it isn't included indicates our general view that certainly in the next 10 years it's unlikely to come forward. It's sites have to be, that we put in and contribute to the supply, have to be effective sites. In other words, there has to be a reasonable prospect that will come forward.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask the officer, under the advice of the Health and Safety Executive, the advised constraint?
Yes, at the moment they wouldn't favour the site.
And on the other side of the argument is the word hopefully. We used to say in the army, if you use the word hopefully, you'll get press-ups. So there's no potential solution at the moment. The Health and Safety Executive advises constraint. It's within a World Heritage Site, something I was greatly involved in getting myself. There's a buffer zone. As a representative for Grangemouth who knows quite a bit about hazard zones, and we're taking a vote today to put housing on that. I think that the message needs to be crystal clear, not just within this chamber, but out with this chamber, that the Health and Safety Executive's advice is constrained. I would ask you how you vote here.
Provost, we've no wish to constrain any discussion, but just to say that before we go to a vote, we would want to recess.
Thank you. In light of my previous, I'd like to ask officers, in light of my previous question around the GP practices are under pressure within the area, I wonder what information you've received from the NHS in terms of including a nursing home within this development. I think my IJB colleagues will be well aware that the move is to care for more people at home for longer and not in nursing homes. But if you put a nursing home there plus 200 houses, what impact that is going to have on the general practice services and health services in the area?
We haven't had a specific response on this from NHS Forth Valley. There certainly would be implications, and we have policies in the plan and a supplementary guidance note that would guide what contribution a developer would have to make to provision.
Okay, we can ask for a recess. 10 minutes, please. Yeah. Okay, 10 minutes, everybody. Thank you. One more person coming back. She's sprinting up the hallway. Is that everybody back in? We'll reconvene the meeting. Thank you very much. And Jim is keeping the doors open there because it's getting very warm in there. So just to let you know that the external doors there are open. Okay, we'll go back to where we were. We've had a number of people speaking already. Is there anybody else want to come into the debate? Okay, so we're just going to go to the split. Everybody agreed to the split? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Provost. And this is the proposal from Councillor Nicholl to reinstate the housing site at Gateside, Bonnybridge, and the vote again is for or against. Provost Buchanan.
For.
Deputy Provost Ritchie.
Against.
Councillor Aitchison.
For.
Councillor Alexander.
Against.
Councillor Balfour.
Against.
Councillor Binney.
Against.
Councillor Bissett.
For.
Councillor Black. Councillor Blackwood.
For.
Councillor Bowes.
Against.
Councillor Coleman.
Against.
Councillor Colley. Councillor Coombs.
For.
Councillor Flynn.
For.
Councillor Garner.
Against.
Councillor Goldie.
For the motion.
Councillor Grant.
For.
Councillor Harris.
For.
Councillor Hughes.
Against.
Councillor Kerr.
For the motion.
Councillor McHugh.
Against.
Councillor McCluckie.
For the motion.
Councillor Meikle-John.
Against.
Councillor Monroe.
For.
Councillor Murtagh.
Against.
Councillor Nicholl.
For the motion.
Councillor Patrick.
For the motion.
Councillor Reid.
Abstain.
And Councillor Spears.
Against.
Provost, there were 14 votes for, 13 votes against, with 2 abstentions, and the proposal is accordingly agreed.
Okay, Colin, carry on then. Grantable Road.
Provost, that takes us to the next proposal, which relates to Grantable Road in Polmont, and I believe that is to be moved by Councillor Nicholl.
Thank you again, Provost. Happily back to my own ward. And the Falkirk Distillery, which I'm very proud to have in my ward. I'm sure most members will have seen the distillery. It's an outstanding building, and I'm sure in the future it will be a great tourist attraction to the area, joining all the other great sites that we have for tourists to see. In order for the proposal for the distillery to flourish to its full extent, Provost, I think it's necessary to perhaps give more guidance as to the designation of the ground which surrounds it, which just now is currently designated as Green Belt. And of course, I always support the retention of the Green Belt, apart from in very exceptional circumstances. And this is one of them, Provost. The motion that I'm about to move does not take away the designation of the Green Belt in the area, but as you can see from the face of the paper, to include a site at Grantable Road, Polmont, as shown in the map below, as a business proposal for business and tourism use. I believe this designation will allow the distillery to develop, to assist in getting more investment into the project, and of course protects the Green Belt by being very specific in the relaxation of the rules which I'm proposing today. So I would formally move that, Provost.
Provost, I'm happy to second. This particular proposal accords with our corporate plan in developing our growing tourism economy. And I think we shouldn't be creating barriers to development such as this, but making sure that there are safeguards. Therefore, I'm happy to second this particular motion.
I'm not disagreeing, Provost, but my only concern is that, as you're well aware, with having these bonded warehouses, the issue with the black mould on the houses in Bonnybridge, I just hope that we do not find that if this goes ahead that we've got black mould all over the family gravestones, with a graveyard being very close proximity. Just wanted that noted.
Provost, just a quick piece of information. The distillery has already picked up its first tour company that will be visiting the distillery. It's a company called Dramfine Tours. I think very aptly named.
Thank you for that information. Councillor Spears.
I would just like to say I share Councillor Coombs' concern about what is colloquially known as angel share, and it's the evaporation spirit that gets not contaminated, but certain algae feeds off it. I wish they'd had that concern in Grangemouth when they voted for bonded warehouses at our dock site, which is now actively killing some of the surrounding trees. Now, this area, as Councillor Nicholl rightly says, is a green belt, and many of the Grangemouth and surrounding areas' family graves are adjacent to this. It would be very, very sad if we walked in there and they were covered in this black mould. We need to get assurances for this company that there will be constant cleaning operations because I don't believe that there is any distillery able to actually eradicate the problem at source.
And I think you'll find that there's no distillery that's taken the blame for the, as you say, the Angel's Ashes. Because, as you know, the people in Bonneville, myself, including other members, were heavily involved in trying to help the situation down in that area for a number of years without any success, because obviously there's nobody going to take the responsibility. OK, then, we've had a motion moved and seconded. Is everybody in agreement to that? Agreed? Thank you very much. That takes us now to the last two issues.
Yes, thank you, Provost. The next of them is the proposal for a policy in relation to changing places toilets, and I think that's Councillor Alexander.
Thank you, Councillor Alexander.
Yes, Convener, the Provost. There's been a great deal of work done by a number of members across the Chamber with regards to changing places. For those that don't know, it's essentially the provision of more modern facilities for disabled people and people with young children, etc. The regulations with regards to disabled facilities, particularly access issues regarding public toilets, etc., are very poor. They've become dated and they've become impractical for many people who require to have the potential for change of clothes, etc., during normal activities. So my colleague will say a bit more with regards to this particular process, but I'd just like to put on record my thanks to Fiona and the Laura in particular for the work they've undertaken, Lorna as well. It's something that is badly needed, and it's a policy which I'd certainly be proud to move.
Thank you. I hope you'll indulge me in saying a few words about the Changing Places campaign and a bit about the history. I first heard about Changing Places toilets more than a decade ago from a parent carer who I worked with, and she's sadly now passed away. She was part of the early campaigning by parents, carers and organisations such as PAMIS, which is now led by the Changing Places Consortium. It was established in 2005 to campaign for Changing Places toilets to be included in all big public spaces so people can access the community. In 2005, there were few discussions, and I can very well remember, there were few discussions in council chambers like today. It's a testament to the tenacity of parents and carers that I sit here, today, seconding this amendment. The parent carer I spoke about, in my view, was a force of nature, someone who believed that not only is the provision of Changing Places toilets about practicalities, it's about rights. The right to take part in leisure, visit tourist attractions and enjoy social activities without the barrier of a lack of toilet provision. Since that time, there's been significant progress, and I'm very, very pleased to have seen that. There's a number across Scotland, including major developments in Glasgow Airport, sports facilities such as our own Mariner Centre and Murrayfield Stadium, shopping and tourism facilities such as the Hydro and the Museum of Scotland and indeed the Scottish Parliament. Also shopping, IKEA in Edinburgh and Livingston Designer Outlet. Changing Places have also developed a Plan a Journey, part of their websites, where families can plan where they would like to go and what Changing Places facilities are on the route. Progress has been made, but there's still much to do. We have a challenge of retrofitting existing buildings, but in the Mariner and Grangemouth Sports Complex, the Council and Trust have made it happen. Plans are underway to deliver in our locality buildings, including Carron Bank, so that individuals can access advice, information and support and have facilities on site. We continue to work with partners such as Forth Valley College, the Trust and the NHS to seek to deliver more facilities. It would be remiss of me not to recognise the commitment of the previous administration and of all parties within the chambers. We all want to make this happen. The purpose of the amendment is to continue to show this commitment and ongoing leadership to delivering facilities to enhance the rights of disabled people and their families. This amendment allows for our officers and planning committee to seek to encourage developers to include changing places toilets in their plans. Whilst it will not be compulsory, it shows that as a council we believe that developers of major new public buildings, community facilities and large commercial developments should have plans to include the facilities. This will be ahead of building regulations from the Scottish Government, which will provide a statutory mechanism. We do not believe that we should wait for these statutory mechanisms. We do not know how long they may take. We know sometimes the Scottish Government does take a little bit longer, and I believe that we should show that leadership and commitment now in our planning Bible for the district. With that, I second the amendment as stated. Thank you.
I also would like to thank all colleagues and all members from our MPs, MSPs, and particularly, as Fiona mentioned, the campaigners who've worked very hard on this issue. I think this gives us an ideal opportunity to, as an authority, take the lead and show that this is the right thing to do, both for the families and those involved, and those who would like to come with them to visit these, to any facilities. The specific proposal, and I would in particular like to thank planning officers and Alistair Shaw in particular for his assistance in looking at the wording of this and trying to come up with something which will be workable. I think it's very important that members understand the nature of this resolution is there to be able, so that we can, when it comes to applications, have something which not only refers to what's already defined as a changing places toilet, which is already there, and officers can advise and assist with that, but it actually gives that framework to be able to say to developers, this is what is required, and it will give Falkirk the front foot to be able to say, we are open for business, we welcome everybody to our authority for culture, for tourism, for anything at all that is proposed in terms of large development and in terms of all the facilities that need to be there for everybody in our community. So I'd happily support that and thank officers again for their assistance in drafting this.
Okay, before I bring in Councillor Goldie, I'd just like to congratulate yourselves and everybody else that's been involved in this project. There's a lot of people that really don't understand what this is about, and it's only usually when it's affecting somebody or their family that they see the need. But you're profiling it very well, and both of you spoke very well in that. Councillor Goldie.
Provost, I would associate myself with your comments and the comments of colleagues across the other side there. But I would like to mention the fact that, not making it political, but I think I spoke to Linda Gow just the other day concerning this particular project, and it was Linda that first brought it to the Council chamber in 2016. So it has been a joint effort by all sides. It's nice if we could just mark that comment, because she certainly brought it forward, working with a family in Bonnybridge who brought it to her attention. And again, no making it political, but we are no legislators. I support the motion, I support what's been said, and I see the papers where our MSPs and MPs are fully supportive of this and getting their pictures taken with it. But it might be an idea if our MSPs would make legislation. They have their... Well, just a minute. I'll not look at the photo, I didn't read it. But what I'm saying is... No. When you're as good looking as me, you always just look at the photos. So what I'm saying is, in all honesty, let's agree what we're doing, but let's also push for MSPs to get the legislation forward.
Yeah, it's just a point of clarification. There will be changes through building standards. As I said, we're just not clear about the time frame for that, and this is about us taking a lead. And I also would like to say, I did mention the previous administration, and I would associate with the congratulations to Linda Gow.
Thank you, Provost. I would concur with what everybody else is saying. I've got friends who have got disabled families. There's nothing worse than going into a toilet and having to lay your child on the floor to change them. So bring this forward for this council is very much appreciated by myself and the constituents that I represent. Thank you.
Could I ask a question about the exact wording of the paragraph? Who determines what's a major new building, a major community facility and a large commercial development?
I think my understanding is that the clarification comes in the second paragraph, which talks about buildings which are visited by large numbers of members of the public. I think, as we've said, this is very much a guidance thing, and it is for the purposes of allowing conversations to take place with developers of these types of facilities, encouraging them to incorporate these on a voluntary basis rather than waiting for the legislation. So I would say that would be the guidance that officers would use, is that contained in the second paragraph.
Okay. I think Fife have a code of their planning, but I think it's pretty wide definition as well. Could I just also agree with the all-party approach to this? It's been happening over a long number of years. Councillor McQuick and I were on FADAP along with Councillor Meikle-John. In fact, we were on it when it was called DRAG, which had an unfortunate connotation for the male members of the group, but that's another story. But one organisation has been omitted from reference, and that's FADAP, the Falkirk Area Disabled Access Panel, who, along with Mr and Mrs Project, have moved us on in recent weeks, and I think we should pay tribute to their efforts as well.
Yes, finally, Provost, we have the proposal in relation to a policy in digital infrastructure, and again, that's Councillor Alexander.
Thanks, Provost. Very briefly, we all have noted the new pavements being laid as part of new schemes and then dug up shortly afterwards to put in Virgin Media or BT or whatever the lines are that go in. This policy looks to address that particular problem, because invariably the repairs that are done to the roads never bring it back to the standard at which they were before. So this policy is designed specifically to encourage developers to act together in the planning process and in the development process. It's designed to encourage the media companies, etc., to have the infrastructure installed at the construction stage, thus preventing unnecessary damage and unnecessary problems in the future. So that's the purpose. I'm happy to move that amendment. Before I do, Provost, can I just say that the debate this afternoon has been an absolute pleasure. It's been constructive, it's been respectful, and we don't always come up to those standards. So hopefully this will be the template for the future. I know our Chief Executive, the new Chief Executive, is sitting there thinking, have I been misled? You know? Just to finish up on that positive note, I think the debate has been a pleasure. We may have disagreed on one or two issues, but we've disagreed in a constructive, non-personal way. So thank you for your contribution in that. Thank the officers, particularly Colin Moody, for his input into this particular process, and thank all members for participating in a very, very constructive manner.
And the reason this comes round about, and David's touched on it there, is with digital cabling getting into particularly newer estates. I have a specific one which I'll cover in a minute. But what will happen is, if they don't put it in actually during the building process, what will happen is digital companies will wait until Falkirk councils adopt the paths before they'll actually put in the infrastructure and the digital cabling to a property. I have a particular experience in the Kinnaird estate, which I'm sure the Director is quite aware of, which has been ongoing since May of 2017. As a council, we have, when it gets to that point, we have got to monitor it, we've got to inspect it, we've got to go and check and make sure the quality's up, the quality of the work is up to a certain standard, and then get involved with the contractors who are actually cutting the trenches through the brand new pavements through these new estates. I spoke to Gary Neal from Roads, and in the last year he's looking at, there's been 3 area roads engineers walkovers, 10 senior roads site walkovers, daily visits by a roads inspector, 3 walkovers with myself. That doesn't include the walkovers I had with the constituents in the area. There's a multitude of complaints about the works, which have received stage 2 complaints, which required director input. If this infrastructure had been put in at the building stage, none of that would have happened. Now, for the people who live there in Kinnaird, they wouldn't have had the pavements with the proverbial stripe up the middle of it. And also, I'm sure we would have saved a significant amount of money on actual officer costs as well. Can I just add on the Kinnaird thing, as councillor in that area, it's good to see that there's no new developments in there. It's just a completion of the current developments in LPD2. And with that, hopefully you'll accept where we're going with this, and I formally second it.
We expect the consultation to kick off around the 28th of September, continuing through to 23rd of November. Those are our provisional dates at the moment.
So it's important